Hey guys, Buildzoid here, and welcome to the latest installment of, I guess what I'm going to be calling OC Adventures from now on. So basically, I've done this for the 7970 Vapor X, and as I get more cards in, I think I'll do more videos like this. So this right here is an HD 5870 reference card that I have. And since the GTX 480 stopped working, and the 680 stopped working, and the 290X also stopped working, and I've already and the other cards I have are like Vega and the Furies and a 590 and a 960, and there might be some other GPU buried somewhere, but none of those particular, like, I've benched most of those to death. Like I've overclocked, like, basically I've spent enough time with all the AMD ones. The 960 I'm not really interested in messing with, and yeah, the 590 is not usable under its own power, and I've still not like gotten enough courage to put any power on it because I want to get the GTX 480 working first. So anyway, since since all the other cards are kind of like either benched to death or not working, um, I decided, well, I need to do, like, I want something to mess with, and I remembered that, hey, this thing's been sitting in a drawer for ages and ages and ages. So I pulled it out and started messing with it. So very quickly it ended up on the Black Morpheus 2 that I have here, and that's with I think these are 2,500 RPM Corsair Maglev fans, or they might be 2,400 RPM. Either way, well over 2,000 RPM. So with these fans, and I actually did get a VRM heatsink to fit on it, but as you can clearly see, the memory chips are left to their own devices as far as cooling goes, because I don't like thermal tape. It's just, yeah. So I have my reasons for that. We're not going to go into the details. It's not that important. Now, in terms of cooling, this thing actually, with this configuration, is, like, it's good. Like, it really, it doesn't get hot, which really isn't that surprising considering 5870s really aren't that power hungry. I had the card peaking around sort of 192 watts on the two 6-pins, so completely out of spec for those, but we all know that the spec is extremely conservative. But yeah, so I had it about, peaking at around 192, and this thing would pull well, it would get to around 50 degrees centigrade, and I think the intake temperature was over 20 degrees for that. So, not a bad result considering that, like, with that much power going into the card, the heat density on a 5870 core is should be pretty bad, because this core is actually really small. Like, the chip is physically small, so it's actually harder to cool. The GTX 480, for example, actually pulls more power than this thing, but this cooler had an easier time doing the GTX 480 because that chip is huge compared to this one. So that's the thing. So cooling wise, very just fine there. I don't know what the VRM temperatures are like. I've not really bothered. It's basically been a case of the VRM hasn't caught fire, and I've pushed a lot of voltage into the card. So it's working. It's my judgment there. I'm not really, like, I'm not that concerned about the VRM temperature, especially because this VRM heatsink is freaking huge. Like, I don't think there's any way it could overheat with that on it. So, yeah, VRM temperatures were acceptable because the card still works. Now, as you can clearly see, the cooling isn't the only thing I've been messing with. I added a whole bunch of capacitors to the VCore VRM. These do help. The card does clock a tad bit better because of them. Unfortunately, these are all, like, really expensive tantalum capacitors, and there's like 24,000 microfarads of them. So these caps cost more than the card. I'm like pretty sure these capacitors cost more than what the card cost me. So that's fun. Because I think okay, well, I need some kind of implement of pointing. So these top ones up here, those are Panasonic's 470 microfarads each, and I think they might be around 5 milliohm ESR. Those are tantalum polymers. And under that, these lower ones are 1000 microfarad Chemet capacitors. And those are also tantalum polymers. And basically, I think the Panasonics, I think, are like 1 pound a piece, and the Chemets are like 2. They are actually 2. So basically, yeah, the caps on this cost more than the card, probably. I think the card was like 30 quid, and there's like close to 30 quid worth of the worth of tantalum polymer capacitors on there. So yeah, not really cost effective, but hey, I can just pull them off and move them onto another card if I feel like doing that. So they do help a bit, only about 10-20 megahertz on core clock extra, but you know that's a nice improvement to have out of the card. Other than that, I attached a voltage sense line so I could measure the core voltage under load. This is not a good way to try hook up an oscilloscope because the wires are just too bloody long. So I will probably end up, because there's like between the capacitors and one other mod I have on here, I really want to put an oscilloscope on this thing. Um, and basically the way I do that is I'll attach a copper, like a bit of copper wire onto the multi-layer ceramics over here, and I always have that connecting like like going from across multiple capacitors, because these multi-layer ceramics, it's really easy to like rip the pads off of them. So yeah, I don't like attaching to one of them because that's a great way to break them. Um, so that's there, and I might get more measuring implementation onto that. The memory VRM got an upgrade of these two 1500 microfarad FP series Nichicons. They're 5 milliohms ESR each, and the end result is I, I need to test. Let's put it that way, because basically I was bored, so I was just throwing stuff at this card to see what's stuck. I do know for a fact that these guys on VCore don't help, but that's partly because these guys are less capacitance than the tantalums, and also because, well, they're aluminum polymers, and like these CAN types have a very high inductance. So they're not really that great for high frequency filtering. And this VRM is a 4-phase, that's a 2-phase. So I think that, well, I still need to test if they help the memory overclocking. I think they do, because the memory didn't clock that great, and now the card, well, it still doesn't clock great, but at least now the card does consistently 1300 megahertz. We'll see if that falls off a cliff once I pull it off. The problem was, I was actually raising the core clock pretty high at the same time as I was trying to max out the memory, so that might have just been me not doing proper A and B testing on that one. Um, so yeah, but also just this actually is a really good example of why if you don't mind the cost, using tantalum polymers in an SMD package or even aluminum polymers in an SMD package is just straight up better than these guys, because, well, like 4,000 microfarads of tantalum takes up less space than 1,500 microfarads of well, a aluminum polymer in a CAN package. Now, admittedly, these are under a pound a piece, and these guys are like 2 pounds a piece, so way more expensive to go with the tantalums. But hey, you can pull them off a card after you're done with it, so it's not like, unless you plan to like leave them on the card permanently, it's not really like the cost isn't that bad in my opinion, and the performance on them is really nice. Like they work a lot better, though you can get away, like there's some cards where these help, but most of the time I found these SMD ones are just straight better. Also, they're smaller, which means if you're running like a multi GPU setup, they don't get in the way as much. So yeah, I've basically decided I like these a lot more than those. Um, what else is there? Right, the other modification I've done, for which we actually need to take the card apart. Now let's see if I put the tool for taking this thing apart somewhere on this desk, and now I can't find it. Oh, there it is. Found it. Okay, so let's get this thing apart, and I'll show you the other modification I've had on it. These are all really loose because I've already tried to shoot this video several times. Get it apart. Up. Up. Go. I dripped thermal grip. Damn it. I dripped cryonol everywhere. Anyway, here's the front of the card. It's a reference PCB. And there's the modification I've done. That's not a VCore control modification. What that is V-droop. that was not fun to attach. Okay, that was really not fun to attach because basically there's a resistor that you have to remove, and then what, like the pads for mounting that resistor, and I don't know what size it is. It might be like an 0402, I think. No, no, that's too small. An 0804 millimeters, I think. Oh, whatever. I'm not sure about the size. Just tiny and obnoxious. That's the best way to describe it. Because they won't show up on the camera. That's the thing. Not without, like, if I enable autofocus, then like the camera will just be derped the rest of the video. So I don't want to run that. But yeah, you remove one resistor and then you have to solder in the potentiometer as well as the, well, that's a trimmer, and a resistor in place of that. And basically the adjustment range on this right here is 1,200 ohms to 1,000 to 2,200 ohms. And this is because the recommended maximum, because basically the V-droop on this card is after you remove that resistor, you need to increase the resistance to get less V-droop. And the voltage controller datasheet, because I actually found the datasheet for one of these, this is a Volterra voltage controller. It's a VT 1165. So getting that datasheet for this was actually, like, I was really surprised I got it. But apparently somebody leaked it, because the datasheet I found is just plastered in this, like, classified Volterra IP or something. Do not reproduce. It's just all over the datasheet. Like, I don't know why, honestly. Like, there's nothing in that datasheet that I found all that interesting. Or at least, like, I didn't find anything in the datasheet that would be like, yeah, I really want to pirate this datasheet for some reason. It's like they're intentionally making it hard to modify voltage, like, do voltage mods like this, which I don't know why. Like, it's my bloody card. I should be allowed to break my card if I want to. Well, yeah, I did find the datasheet, so I did get a V-droop mod working on this. And the reason why I wanted to test out the V-droop mod is this thing has a lot of droop out of the box. So at 1.462 volts set in software, this thing was drooping all the way down to 1.408 in 3D Mark Vantage on the stock V-droop settings. After the modification at 1.45 volts, it droops only down to about 1.415. There is a way to get even less V-droop out of this, but that includes more painful soldering, and I'm kind of happy with the reduced level of V-droop I've hit already. Interestingly enough, I do believe I've hit a short, like a soft overcurrent protection on this card, because after the V-droop mod, if I run it at 1.45 volts and 1070 core, this thing will actually throttle on the GT2 of Vantage really hard. If I give it a bit less voltage, then it doesn't throttle. But yeah, the VRM, like, I've gone and pissed off the VRM here. Yeah, so that's unfortunate. And I've talked to Splave, who's been working on HD 5870s a bit about this, and he's tested a bunch of cards, and he had one or two that did this same thing, where the card would, like, throttle a lot. I don't know. Well, there's definitely a way to fix this. I can guarantee you that. It's probably like, you know, violating all the best guidelines of what the datasheet recommends you don't, like, it will be totally against what the datasheet recommends you do, but I really need more power power capability, I think. So there's a good chance, like, I don't know, I'll have to look at the way to do a current limit modification for this voltage controller, and if that turns out to be a massive pain, I might just decide to e-power the damn thing, because if it doesn't want to cooperate, that's actually easier for me to do. But, you know, with the V-droop mod, it does actually help the overclocking a bit. It does, like, significantly raise the power consumption as well, because you do end up just running more V-core. So, yeah, that's kind of interesting. But because of that droop mod, I actually want to see what the oscilloscope shows for low droop vs, like, high droop. So that's why I want to test it, as well as I want to test how, because there might be some kind of interactions between the V-droop settings as well as the output filtering for the VRM. So I want to see if that shows up on the scope and we see anything interesting that might might be worth considering for overclocking range. But right now it basically looks like less V-droop just straight up helps the card clock better by basically raising the core voltage. But I prefer doing that because this card has no idle voltage, because one of the other modifications I've done, which isn't physical, is I've modified the BIOS, because this card has an interesting issue in 3D Mark Vantage. The last CPU test, so the one where you have all the aeroplanes just getting like wrecked. So on Crash and Burn, this card will for some reason just lock up if you clock the core too high, and that makes zero sense, because really the card should be like at idle frequency and idle voltage. And I think what's happening with the card is it tries to go to idle voltage first and go like it goes idle voltage first, or like something screws up somewhere. Something happens before something else is supposed to happen in terms of voltage and clocks, and it locks up. So I ended up modifying the BIOS, and now the card doesn't idle. Especially after you start playing with your core voltage in Sapphire Tricks. Like normally a 5870 idles on 0.95 volts. This thing out of the like if you just fire it up, idles on 1.06, and that's on this thing. So 1.06 on that thing, and once you actually start overvolting the card, it idles at the overvolted level. So when I was pushing 1.462 volts with high V-droop, so before that modification, this thing was idling on 1.45 volts because there's no V-droop. So, well, there was a lot of V-droop, so it would idle 1.45, then it would go under load, and it would droop all the way down to 1.408. Now, with the reduced V-droop, it idles at a closer voltage to the load voltage, which I honestly prefer, because it's safer for the card, because I'm not shoving a ton of voltage into it at idle just to get a certain amount of load voltage. So that's definitely an improvement there. But yeah, I still want to test on that, and other than that, I still want to mess with the, I ideally want to find where the memory timings in the BIOS are for these memory chips and try mod the memory timings, because I think these are Samsung. Yeah, these are all Samsung memory chips. Now, I don't know how the Samsung GDDR5 behaves, like this older Samsung GDDR5 behaves, but I think it should be possible to tighten up the timings. I don't really think the memory frequency that this is topping out at, I don't think that's a limitation of the memory chips. I think that's mostly the memory controller, and so we should be able to push the timings a bit lower, assuming I figure out where it is in the BIOS, because my usual method of hunting down memory timings did not work with this card. Admittedly, I didn't really spend that much time on it, because I was mostly interested in fixing the Crash and Burn crash. That's a fun test name. But fixing the CPU test crash, which I did get fixed. So yeah, that's kind of that. What else is there with this card? Right. Sapphire Tricks actually has VDDCI voltage control. So this VRM right here, that's VDDCI on this, and Tricks has voltage control for that. And I have actually, the other thing I need to test with Tricks is what the voltage range on this card is, because I don't, from reading the data sheet, I can't remember specifically which one it is, but this voltage controller is spec'd for Intel and AMD voltage regulator standards, and I think the AMD standard goes to 1.55, like the standard that this voltage controller is built for. The newer ones have different voltage ranges, but I think the AMD one is 1.55, and the Intel is 1.62 or something. I'm not sure if I'm actually maxing out that voltage standard, that range. So that'll be interesting, but I need to put the card on liquid nitrogen to test that, because I'm not shoving that much voltage into the card on air. That would probably not be good for its lifespan. And I'm already I think I'm really hammering the card already with voltage. So that's a thing. So it'll be interesting to see if it maxes out. There is one issue with using Sapphire Tricks on this card. For some reason it likes to crash. Like if you just try, like especially if you try to apply a frequency change at the same time as a voltage change, it'll cause a crash. So that's unfortunate. But if you just change, if you just if you just change your if you just set your voltages and then you set your memory and core clock, then it's actually then it seems to play okay with it. But then if you try like after a few like it'll eventually crash anyway if you keep trying to change frequencies. So benching this thing hasn't been particularly pleasant. I think it's some kind of issue with like Windows 10 and the AMD driver and the version of Trix I'm on, but unfortunately the newer versions of Sapphire Trix do not have voltage support for this card, which is infuriating. Because the old one does. The old one works great, except for all the random crashing. But yeah, that's also a thing. But overall, it's been an interesting journey with the card. I think I might want. Well, I'm definitely actually want to pick up more 5.870s. Um, because I want to see if like I don't run into a card without the OCP issue. But obviously I have the data sheet for the voltage controller, which oh yeah, that's we should just do like a voltage controller video, some kind of thing. I don't know like how I'll do that, but because well whatever. um, which reminds me, I will be doing a Q&A live stream today where we'll just discuss like channel stuff. So head over to the Twitch at 9 p.m. UK time, whatever UK time is. So if you just punch it to Google, 9 p.m. UK time, it'll tell you. Or UK time, and it'll tell you the current time in the UK. So you can figure out when the stream will be from that. Anyway, yeah, interesting voltage controller data sheet. Really obnoxious, honestly. Like, it took me really long to figure out how to deal with the V-droop thing. But, partly because I don't think I was really, like, I was working on the card late at night. I think I've covered everything. We've talked about tricks, we've talked about the BIOS mod, we talked about... Oh, I haven't talked about how it scores. I've told you all the things I've done. I haven't told you the results, have I? So right now the card maxes out at like 1070 core, 1300 megahertz memory. 1070 core is kind of unreliable about running. 1060 and 1050 work great, like absolutely flawless. 1070 is a bit dodgy because at that point it starts tripping the overcurrent protection and it starts being well, if you lower the voltage enough to not hit the overcurrent protection, the 1070 core isn't really stable anymore, and it'll crash sometimes. Um, and I've only benched it for like 3D Mark Vantage because I was thinking, hey, I have an X299 Dark, and the 7940X spits out like 104 to 105, 106,000 CPU points. So I figured if this is like reasonably fast, I should have a really, really easy time getting a ton of points on it. Well, that plan did not work out because this thing is really slow. Like, I'm surprised how slow these cards are. It spits out about 23,500 points for the GPU test, which is right in line with other 5.870s for these kinds of clock speeds, which is why I want to try modify the memory timings, because I don't know if cramming more voltage into the core will hurt the core. I don't think I've hit the end of scaling yet. Like, it's scaling really slowly. It seems to need like 50 millivolts more for every 10 megahertz. But, you know, if that holds up to all the way to like 1.7 volts, that still counts as scaling. Though I'm not sure if at 1.7 volts the card would actually work anymore. So, yeah, I really need to put this thing on liquid nitrogen at this point. And I'm happy that, like, I'll be putting it on liquid nitrogen basically in this state. And I'll just plasti dip this area around the core. And I'll try... Actually, I'll probably be able to run the oscilloscope probes while we're on liquid nitrogen. Though I'm not sure how I'll hook up like, make the oscilloscope visible on the live stream. So, yeah, it's like for an air cooled 5.870, it's doing exactly what it should be doing. I'd like to test some more cards to maybe find a better one, or well, just have more cards to play with to see how those behave. Because right now I have a point, like, this is the only 5.870 I've ever messed with, so exploring new territory, and the best way to explore GPUs is to have more of the same one. So, yeah, that's it for the video. Thanks for watching. Like, share, subscribe, leave a comment down below. Don't forget about the live stream. That will be on Twitch at 9 p.m. And it will be just me being a talking head. There won't really be any overclocking going on, but you'll be able to get your questions answered and that kind of thing. What else is there? Right, and if you'd like to support what I do here with actually hardcore overclocking, then I have a PayPal, a Patreon, and what else is there? PayPal, Patreon, T-shirts, and I'm getting rid of 2 motherboards. So if somebody wants motherboards for cheap, there's an X99 and a B350. They're available on the AHOC Junkyard. Also, I'll be listing the 5930K pretty soon. I've decided I do actually want to get rid of that chip for sure. Like, I don't want it anymore. So, yeah, that's it for the video. Thanks for watching, and see you next time. Where's the mouse?